talk. Thank you for coming to my second talk. This one is a new idea, so I want you to attend this talk with an open mind, right? So the idea is to combine testing and documentation so that they can go hand in hand, right? Again, my name is Shauvik. I am the founder of More Quality, which is a testing startup, one of the very few testing startups. So before I start, I just want to make it clear that I'm not going to talk about developer docs, right? I'm not going to talk about Java docs or API docs. It's mainly targeted to end user documentation, something that an end user or a mobile app user would go, right, and try to answer their questions, right? How do I use this app? What does this app do? Things like that, right? So before I delve into documentation, let's, all of us, develop apps day in and out, right? So I just want to acknowledge that developing apps is hard, right? It takes up a lot of time, like a couple of months, right? And these emojis actually, show our emotions, right? At the start, we are just chicks. We don't know what's going on, right? And then, as things, unfold, we just are, puzzled. We don't know how to do things, right? Then we figure it out. We just get over the hurdle. We are happy. Then there are sad times because we find like serious bugs, right? And at the end, we are happy because, those are tears of joy, by the way, because the app is all developed and it's ready to ship. But right before we are going to ship, we actually need to take care of other things, right? For example, those of you who were here for the keynote, remember that you should be building apps for everybody, right? So you have your app on your phone, but now this app is going to go from you and it's going to get to everybody in the world. So what are the kinds of things that you need to look at? Most of this is repeat of what you heard from Corey, but expectations or the background that the user has. So this is actually a personal story, actually a friend story. This friend of mine used to work at Adobe, and they came up with the mobile version of Photoshop, right? And they gave it out to some beta testers, and they did not get a very good response. So they invited some of them over to come to their office, and they did a usability test, right? That's where they put a camera on your face, they record your facial expression, they put a camera on the phone to see what you're doing, and they started observing this person. And after some point, they just saw that the person was confused. They just didn't know how to do those steps, right? And they went and asked that person. So it turns out, so this app was being released to, Photoshop was being released as an app to consumers, right? Most of them did not know or have experience using desktop Photoshop. So they didn't know how the widgets function. So something that was supposed to be slided, they were trying to tap on it, right? This is something super simple, right? But somebody who has used Photoshop would know that, okay, this is a slider that needs to be slided, right? So those kinds of things. People have different backgrounds or expertise, and they might not know how to use your app, for example. Next, device capability, right? You might have like the most cutting edge device here, and the app might work perfectly here, but when a user in a developing country is using it on an old hardware, right, your app might not work as good, or it might look totally different, right, because maybe it only supports holo theme, it does not support material or something like that, right? Things like that. You also have to worry about usage patterns. How we use apps, being developers or being people in technology, is totally different from how a farmer, let's say, or my mom would use an app, right? Also, based on the times of day, our interaction patterns with app changes, right? Let's say I'm trying to use the CNN app. I would mostly, if I'm going on a train or somewhere, I would probably read it on my watch, right? Or else I'll see a notification. When I have time, I'll probably open up the website or on a tablet and see it, right? So the time I spend, the tolerance I have for the app is very different. My usage pattern is very different. Then, of course, languages, right? So if you are localizing your app, you might want to consider the different cases. People who are not familiar with English, right, in developing countries, they might not understand what that widget thing means, right, what that label means. Network conditions again, right? If they are on a slower network, like in India, for example, most places you only have GPRS. And even here, right, if you are traveling, you probably have a spotty network, right? So you don't want to have your app fail under those network conditions, and so on, right? How far are your users from your servers? Are there other apps that are installed on the device which are doing something nasty, making the resources less available to your app, right? Let's say you test for everything, you consider every possible thing, right? And you release your app. Still then this happens, right? This is from the Microsoft Outlook app, right? It got a really poor rating. And if you read the reviews, you'll see that the user says that something doesn't appear to function, right? Maybe it had the feature, but the user just didn't know how to use that feature, right? I'm not on the favor or against Microsoft, right? But this is just an example where if the user doesn't understand how to do something, they will go and shout on Play Store. They will maybe leave a comment on Twitter. It's really bad reputation for us, right? At this point, you have an option of going here, responding to the user that, okay, this is how you do it, but do you want to do it, right? And even if you do, even if you went to the extreme, you did this, right? What will the user do? Will they give you that one chance, right? Probably not. It tarnishes your reputation. So that is why we have end user docs, so that end users get familiar with our app, right, before using it. So let's see, how do we create these docs today? So the first thing, online help, straightforward, right? I'll use the example of WhatsApp. So on the website, WhatsApp has a FAQ like this, right? If you click on one of these items, right, how to use WhatsApp calling, they will have a brief description and then a screenshot to tell you how to use WhatsApp calling, right? Straightforward, very easy. If any user Googles for how to use WhatsApp calling, this thing comes up on top, so they get the information. So this is the first way in which we provide help or docs to users. Let's look at another way. This is in-app help. So if you've used any of Google's apps, if you open up the sidebar, you'll see at the bottom there is something called help there, right? If you tap on that, it actually opens up a web view, which is the same information on the website, but in a mobile context, right? Here, you just have like the popular things or articles of how to access some of the features, but you could also search on top, and hopefully there's an article for whatever you're searching. If you don't find anything, you can send the feedback, basically. And this is not just Google apps, but most other apps. This is from a third-party tool called HelpStack that allows you to maintain these FAQs online, and you can have it open up in a mobile web view. Okay, so in-app help. You could go one level further, right? So apps like this, this is Intercom, and these are libraries. What happens is either there is a real person or a bot sitting at the other end, and the user can come and ask a question, right? How do I do this, right? And if it's a bot, they'll probably look up a database and show them, tell them like these are the top 5 things on how you can do this and this and this. May not answer the question correctly, but if there's a person, you can actually tell them, give them feedback. And some of these tools, like on the right-hand side, you're seeing that if the person is not available, it'll just send a message that, okay, sorry, we're not available now. Leave us your question, we'll get back to you. At least the user is getting some response back from you, right? They won't hopefully shout on support channels. So this is another way to provide customer support. And this is the walkthroughs and hints are really popular. So this is the Google Photos app. So right when the user opens the app for the first time, the app actually takes them through this set of screens or tutorials. They can skip it if they like, but basically what this does is for a user that does not have any idea about this app, they maybe just heard about it and downloaded it. For them, it basically trains them on what this app is supposed to do. It shows them basic gestures on how what actions are supported in the app, so that they will sort of hopefully figure it out by themselves without going online and having to search for it. And finally, if you wanted, like PayPal, you could also make a video. So I won't show you the whole video, but in this is a quick tour of the PayPal app, where they introduce what are the basic features in that app, and they walk you through all those different features, right? This, of course, is the most expensive way of providing online documentation, but definitely an option. So here they're walking you through all the different features, and then they dive in deep and then tell you how to buy things, change your settings, and so on. Okay, so you might say, what's the problem? We seem to be doing a good job, right? We have these 4 or 5 ways in which we can provide documentation to users, and maybe they're getting it, right? Then what's the problem? Well, problem is that things can change, right? So there could be difference in your existing set of users, the devices, right? So you might have recorded the instructions for, let's say, Jelly Bean, and then the user is using the latest, so it's outdated. The user does not definitely connect with what they're seeing in the instructions and what they have in their hand, right? Also, maybe you recorded the instructions for the phone. This is the Google I/O app, and then look, you can see that on the phone it looks very different than a tablet, right? So again, this can cause confusion. They'll go and probably send out some messages on Twitter and social media or Play Store, and it's usually bad. You would want to avoid that. So these are existing differences that are there, but also there could be difference that you introduce intentionally, right? You have version 1 of the app, and you go through this extensive process of making documentation for it, and then you add a bunch of new features, or maybe you adapt it to material. It looks totally different. The docs are now outdated. So, and this is what we want to fix, right? So let's look at tests and how tests can help here. So I would say that the tests are the same problem, where let's say you have app version 1 and tests version 1, okay? Then you add more features to it, and you call it version 2, right? What happens to your tests? Can anybody just comment? So what will happen to your existing tests?
Write more tests.
Okay, you may need to write more tests for the new functionality. That is one thing.
Rewrite tests.
You might have to rewrite tests.
All the ones that started failing. Update current tests.
Yeah, okay. So basically what will happen is some of them will still pass, which means that, okay, you haven't broken any functionality. Some of them will fail, right? And the ones that will fail, they'll fail out of one of two reasons. The first is maybe there's a bug that the test caught, right? In that case, yay for tests. We wrote the tests and caught a bug. The user didn't face it, so that's great, right? We found it. But a lot of time it happens that your app has changed. That's why the test is failing or erroring out, because it can't do the things anymore, right? And this is a great way, because if these tests are in continuous integration or run in a continuous fashion, then you know that, okay, your tests are out of date. You need to update them, right? The same thing is not true for docs, right? Because a user has to complain about it. And that's the motivation on how we can combine tests and docs. So here, I'm going to propose this idea basically, that the report that the test generates can be used as inputs for creating a documentation, right? That's the basic idea, and just listen to it with an open mind, and I'm going to show you an example on how we can do it. Okay, so let's first look at how we write tests today. Most of us here are Android developers or testers, so you might be familiar with Java. So this is how you write a test in your JUnit, right? So at the start you have at before, which is the setup function, which is run before every test. At the end you have at after, which is the tear down function, which is run after every test, right, to clear up stuff. And the actual test, it has the steps for you to do the test. You do some actions, you do some actions, and at the end you get a result which you check whether the result is expected or not, right? This is a simple structure of a test. Now there are several frameworks for you to write tests. One of them is Espresso, right? How many here are familiar with Espresso? Okay, a lot of people, right? So yeah, Espresso tests just have these three functions: onView, matcher. Matcher is a class. It will match something and give it to you, match a view, right? Then once you get the view, you can either do a perform on it, or you can do a check on it. Perform is an action that you want to perform, check is an assertion you want to do, right? So simple examples from the Espresso slides itself. On view with ID r.greeting, so it's getting that element with ID r.greeting, and it's performing a click on it, okay, the first step. The second set of actions, it's saying on view with text hello.steve. So it's selecting a view with a text hello Steve, and it's checking whether that view is displayed or not, right? This is a simple way of writing Espresso tests. Now there are other frameworks than Espresso as well. Who here uses Appium? Okay, a lot of people are here as well. So the similar tests could be written in Appium like this, right? Where you would say that given a driver, it would be an Android driver, you would find element by ID greeting and then click on it. The second one, given a driver.find element by ID text field and then send keys to this text field, right? However, remember that here when you're saying ID, it's not the Android ID. It's usually the accessibility label or a content description as we call it, right? That's what Appium uses to identify elements. Okay, so great. We can write these tests. let me take you to a detour. So if you don't want to write tests, if you want to get tests for free, right? How do you do that? Well, there are tools for that as well. Espresso has, Android has a test recorder. So this is inside the IDE itself. So if you have the developer environment, you could say that record my tests. You have the app running on the right side. You just interact with the app there, and it will pre-populate the set of steps and give you a test case, right? It generates Espresso tests. We have built a tool called Barista. It's actually an app. You don't need to have the developer environment. It runs on your phone, and what you can do is, using it, you can launch your app and then interact with your app. It would record the test cases in Espresso, Appium, and UI Automator formats. So give it a try. Okay, let's go back to the main talk. Okay, so I hope that I've convinced you that tests could be used to generate docs, right? Let me show you how. So before I show you how, let me just quickly show you BDD. Has anybody used BDD here? Okay, several people. Cucumber is a tool that people use to write BDD tests. So this test is this comes from the idea that tests should be readable, right? People should be able to read your test cases, right? In this case, what they're doing is they're taking a to-do list, right, and adding something to it. So you would click on the plus button, right? User clicks add task button. Okay, once that is done, user enters item A here. And then it checks, presses the add button on the previous screen here, this add button. And at the end, you want to check whether the list contains A or not, right? Okay, so this is test that is readable. When you run this test, what you get is everything is green, okay? So, and if it fails, then a step will be red, okay? So this is, okay, at least, readable tests. But I wouldn't use it for, showing to end users, right? Because this is like very technical and language, right? So can we do better than this? Let me show you how we can do. So our goals here are two goals, right? First is that we still want to have reliable tests. Just because we are generating documentation, we don't want flaky tests, right? The second thing is that we want to have easy to read end user docs. And by easy to read, I mean there should be steps for each document. Each step should have a description. And also, hopefully, if I can have screenshots, then that's great, right? Then user would be able to relate with my test. So I developed a very small prototype tool called DocTest. What it does is, you write your tests using that tool. It currently uses Appium, but you could, change the driver and use Espresso if you wanted. To run the test case, it interacts with the Android emulator and generates test reports as well as docs. And let me quickly show you how it does that. So I'll go to Android Studio. So this is my test where you can see the setup phase. I am just initializing Appium and giving it to doctest. And at the end, I'm just calling, in the teardown, I'm just calling driver.quit, right? And this is one test. So this is the first implementation of this tool, and it's open source. I'm going to give you the link. So don't get boiled down with the like the syntax or how it is implemented. It could always be improved. But what it is essentially doing is it's starting a test session where I give a description. Then each step there is a description that goes with the step, and then I say which element I'm going to do that action on. So for example, I'm clicking on add task button. Then I'm sending keys, speak at Android Summit to this widget, right? And then I'm clicking on add by this XPath, right? So these are the different steps you need to do to add the to-do. Similarly, if I want to add multiple to-dos, what I'll do is I have created a utility function below, right, to add a to-do. Here, it's not a test. So what I'm doing here is I'm just calling that utility function here and then adding a new test, right? Speak at Android Summit again, because this is my second talk. So, okay. And then for marking a to-do done, basically we'll add a to-do and then later, we'll click on the done button next to the to-do, okay? So let's quickly run this test. And I have an Android emulator running here, which seems to be very weird because of my resolution. Okay, let's see if it works. Okay, I changed my resolution because of I connected to this projector. That's why it's not showing up completely, but it's doing the test, and as you'll see, it'll pass. Hopefully, can I? Okay, increase it. Yeah, okay, there you go. So it ran test 1 and it passed. So my test report is right here with JUnit. You can see that it's running. The second test. Yeah, it's slow on purpose because I didn't want it to go through fast so that you can't see it. But yeah, you could definitely make it faster. It's done. Then it's going to do that. But anyway, since I'm short of time, I'll just I'll skip this, and I'll show you that while it's running the test case, it's actually generating these markdown documents here. So what's there in this markdown documents? Let's see. So as you can see here, what it's doing is it's adding the tasks here, right? Like the description of the step, and it's adding a screenshot for that step, okay? And it's super simple. So what you could do is you could just take this markdown document, and the screenshots are right here. So you could take all of this, you could put it in a static site generator like Jekyll, and what you'll have is something like this, right? Where you have your steps. So if you, let's say, how do I add a to-do item? I can say, okay, I can click on add task, then I do something, then I do something, and so on, right? Similarly, how do I mark something as done? I click on done right next to it, and then that's it. It deletes my thing. Now quickly going back to the. So that's essentially it, that I can create test reports as well as docs just from the same set of test cases, right? And this tool is available open source here. If you have any comments or critiques about the design, that's why it's open source. Please go and open up a GitHub issue. We can discuss there, right? And thanks. That's all I have. As parting thoughts, I would like you to think and tell me, do you have end user docs supporting your app? And if you do, then, or if you don't, right, would you consider reusing test reports as docs? Thanks.
Any questions?
Just a comment. My particular business area, test reports get consumed by a lot of people who don't ever use the system, okay, or are not technical, or for a variety of whatevers, and to be able to take a test report and turn something into that a otherwise unexposed end user could consume sounds like a good idea to me.
Okay, awesome.
The concept is good. How it would actually work, I'm not sure. But
Okay.
I just comment. That sounds good to me.
Thanks.
Yeah, quick question. How recent is the development for the new tool that you just put out? Is that this year? Is that something very recently that you just published?
Very recently, yeah. I just published.
Are you familiar with Fastlane toolset by any chance?
Yes.
Would you consider writing a plugin?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's great work, so thank you.
Okay.
Because we've actually got our own. Sam, you're going to use your.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.